Maria woke early that morning with a knot in her stomach. She had one last chance to make a good impression. Today was the day of her final job interview. She had dreamed of this moment for weeks. She dressed carefully, choosing a simple blouse and neat skirt. Her heart beat fast as she locked the door. She climbed into her old car, hoping it would make it through the short drive. The engine sputtered and coughed before giving one last shudder. Maria's heart sank. She tried the ignition again, but the car went silent. She sat for a moment in the quiet morning air, her hands trembling on the steering wheel. Her mind raced. She could not believe this was happening now. She thought of the long bus ride she might have to take if she left the car here. She thought of the time she would lose, the chance slipping away. She opened the glove compartment and pulled out a few bills. Her eyes filled with worry when she saw only a single dollar bill folded neatly between the papers. She counted all her cash, $1, no more. She had spent everything else on bus fare and coffee this week. Her job search had drained her savings. She had no extra money for emergencies. A cold gust of wind blew through the open window, and she felt a chill in her bones. Maria took a deep breath. She told herself she could not give up. She had prepared so much for this interview. She reviewed the company's mission in her mind, helping families find hope, building stronger communities, making a difference. She believed in their work. She believed she could help them. She closed her eyes and pictured herself answering questions with confidence. She pictured the panel nodding at her ideas. Still, her stomach growled loudly. She realized she had not eaten since yesterday afternoon. Hunger gnawed at her focus. She pressed a hand against her belly and searched the small street for a place to eat. She noticed a tiny cafe with a faded sign that read Sunnyside Bistro. A small bell jingled as she pushed the door open. The cafe smelled warm, like fresh bread and sweet coffee. Inside, a single barista stood behind the counter. She must have been new, Maria thought, judging by the name tag she wore. The space was cozy, with 2 small tables by the window and a few chairs tucked under the counter. A chalkboard menu listed simple items: toast with jam, egg sandwich, soup of the day. Maria's eyes darted to the prices. Even the cheapest item cost more than $1. She sighed softly. Then she noticed a man seated at one of the tables. He looked as tired as she felt. His suit was wrinkled and his tie hung loose. He rubbed his eyes as he stared at a stack of papers. He looked up when Maria walked in, giving her a small, tired smile. Maria returned the smile, though her heart felt heavy. She felt a flicker of connection. He seemed alone with the same tired look she wore. Maria stepped to the counter and placed her dollar bill on the worn wood. She said softly, "I'd like the egg sandwich, please." The barista's eyes widened. "Ma'am, the sandwich is $2.50. Maria nodded, feeling a small wave of embarrassment. She reached into her purse to count her coins, just pennies. She shook her head. "I'm sorry. Only have this." Before Maria could feel worse, the man at the table stood and walked over. He placed a few bills on her dollar. His hands shook slightly, and she realized he had even less. He said, "I'll cover the rest." Maria stared at him in surprise. He smiled kindly and turned back to his table. Maria's heart softened. She looked at the barista. "Then I'll have 2 sandwiches," she said, voice steady. The barista blinked. "2 sandwiches?" She looked at Maria, then the man. He gave a small nod. Maria placed the single dollar on the counter and moved to the table. She slid a second sandwich toward the stranger. He looked up, confusion and relief in his eyes. "Here, this is for you," she said quietly. He hesitated, then accepted it with a gentle thank you. They sat together, 2 strangers sharing a simple meal. The morning light fell through the window, soft and warm. Maria watched the man unwrap his sandwich. He took a careful bite, as if savoring a rare treat. Maria turned her gaze to the door, wondering how long she had before the interview. She felt both grateful and guilty. Grateful for the company, guilty for being late. They began to talk. Maria learned his name was James. He confessed he had just moved to the city last week. He had lost his own job and was looking for work. His voice was quiet but steady. He said he once led teams at a small firm, but the company closed. He had nothing left but hope. Maria shared her own story, how she had saved for this interview, how every dollar counted. They laughed at the irony of two job seekers buying lunch with borrowed money. Their laughter filled the small cafe. It was a simple sound, but it felt like hope returning. Maria saw a light in James's eyes. She recognized in her own. They spoke of their dreams, of the work they wanted to do, of the difference they hoped to make. Maria felt her anxiety melt as she realized she was not alone. They promised each other they would return the favor someday. Suddenly, Maria checked her watch. Time had slipped away. She jumped to her feet. "Oh no, I'm late," she gasped. James stood too, concern on his face. Maria thanked him and the barista, her words rushing. She grabbed her bag and dashed outside. The cool air hit her face as she ran down the street, her mind spinning with worry and gratitude. As she turned the corner toward the office building, she saw the tall glass tower gleaming in the sunlight. It looked so different from the small cafe, so big, so formal. Maria smoothed her skirt and took a deep breath. She told herself she could do this. Her heart still pounded, but she felt a new confidence. That act of kindness, small as it was, reminded her of who she was and what she stood for. She walked up to the revolving door, letting the morning light fill her with determination. She stepped inside, ready to face whatever came next. She did not yet know how this lunch would change her life, but she carried the memory of James's smile and her own resolve with her. Maria told herself she would give her best, for herself and for the stranger who had shared her last dollar. And with that thought, she strode through the lobby toward her future. Maria stepped off the revolving door and found herself in a vast lobby of gleaming marble floors and towering glass walls. Her shoes clicked loudly against the hard surface, each step echoing in the silent space. She paused for a moment, her breath catching. The lobby was bigger than she had imagined from the outside. Potted plants lined the perimeter, and a long reception desk stood like a polished monolith in the center. Behind it, two receptionists in crisp uniforms spoke quietly into headsets. A row of visitor chairs sat along one wall, all empty except for a lone magazine left open on a side table. She approached the desk, her heart thumping in her chest. "Good morning," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm here for an interview with Mr. Parrish." The receptionist looked up, her expression polite. "Name, please." "Maria Sanchez," she replied, handing over her business card on a small silver tray. The receptionist tapped on her keyboard and smiled. "Thank you, Miss Sanchez. Mr. Parrish is expecting you. Please take a seat. He'll be with you shortly." Maria nodded and turned to sit. She sank into one of the leather chairs, pulling her bag onto her lap. Her hands felt clammy as she smoothed her skirt. She tried to steady her breath by inhaling deeply through her nose and exhaling slowly through her mouth. She thought again of that little cafe and the man she had shared lunch with. She tried to picture his face, but she only saw his warm smile and the gentle way he had covered her extra sandwich. Her mind drifted back to that moment. How kind he had been, given his own struggle. She closed her eyes and imagined him saying, "I'll cover the rest." She remembered the relief she had felt and how their laughter had made the morning brighter. For an instant, she felt a warmth spread through her chest. Then she shook her head, reminding herself to focus. This interview mattered. Everything in her future depended on it. After a few minutes, a door to her right opened, and a tall woman in a tailored suit stepped out. She carried a digital tablet and offered a friendly nod. "Maria Sanchez." "Yes," Maria answered, standing quickly, her chair scraping softly against the floor. "I'm Patricia Lane," the woman said. "I'll take you to the conference room." She led Maria down a carpeted hallway, the sounds of their shoes muted by the thick carpet. The walls were decorated with abstract paintings in bright colors. Sunlight streamed through large windows at each turn. Maria tried to study the paintings. Okay. But her thoughts kept drifting back to the cafe and that stranger's kind act. Patricia opened a set of double doors and motioned Maria inside. The room was glass-walled on three sides, offering a view of the city skyline. Long polished table stretched from one end to the other, with 8 chairs evenly spaced around it. At the far end sat 3 people, a middle-aged man with gray hair, a woman in her 30s with sharp features, and a younger man in glasses typing on a laptop. All three looked up as Maria entered. Patricia introduced her. "This is Miss Sanchez. Thank you for coming." She offered a gentle smile, then closed the door behind her. The moment the door shut, Maria felt the air change. The room seemed smaller, more serious. The gray-haired man stood and extended his hand. "Welcome, Ms. Sanchez. I'm Alan Wright, head of human resources." He shook her hand firmly. Maria returned the handshake, remembering to smile. "I'm honored to be here," she said, her voice a touch steadier than she felt. The woman with sharp features rose next. "I'm Denise Wu, Director of Community Outreach. We've read your resume with interest." Next. The young man lowered his laptop and spoke. "I'm Colin Blake, Operations Manager. Thank you for joining us." Maria nodded to each of them in turn, then looked to the chair opposite the gray-haired man. "Thank you all for this opportunity." Just then, the tall glass door on the side of the room opened quietly. A man stepped in, carrying a leather briefcase. His suit was impeccable and his tie perfectly knotted. He looked around the room, his gaze moving from the city view to the faces at the table. Then his eyes landed on Maria. For a heartbeat, Maria felt as if time slowed. She recognized him immediately from their breakfast encounter. The same tired eyes, the same gentle smile. The man approached the table. Denise rose and said, "Mr. Parrish, this is our final candidate, Maria Sanchez." Mr. Parrish nodded and extended a hand. His voice was calm but carried authority. "Miss Sanchez, lovely to meet you." Maria stood, her mouth suddenly dry. She reached out and shook his hand, her mind racing. The warmth of his welcome stirred. Memories of his kindness. He took the seat at the head of the table, placing his briefcase on the floor beside him. The panel members moved their chairs slightly to make room. Maria sat down, her spine straight, her heart still pounding. She forced herself to look at Mr. Parrish directly. He smiled at her, and she felt a flicker of confidence. He seemed friendly, not at all like the distant CEO she had imagined. Mr. Wright cleared his throat. "We've arranged for a standard interview process," he said. "Each of us will ask you a few questions about your experience, and then we'd like to hear your ideas on program development." He looked to Maria. "Are you ready?" Maria nodded, trying to anchor herself. She felt James Parrish's presence beside her, a strange comfort in this formal room. She decided to speak clearly, letting each breath guide her words. "I'm ready." The first question came from Denise. "Miss Sanchez, tell us why you're passionate about community outreach." Maria thought of her own volunteer work at the local food bank, of the families she had met, of James waiting for that simple sandwich. She spoke about empathy, about how small acts could make a big difference. She mentioned her own breakfast dilemma and how that man's generosity had reminded her of why she cared about people as she spoke. She noticed James Parrish's eyes soften. He seemed to listen deeply. She felt encouraged and continued, describing ideas for neighborhood workshops, mentorship programs, and partnerships with local businesses. When she finished, Denise nodded thoughtfully, and the panel moved on to the next question. Colin asked about her organizational skills. Maria described her time managing schedules for a small nonprofit, coordinating volunteers, and handling limited budgets. She spoke honestly about challenges she had faced and how she had solved them. Each answer felt more confident as she remembered that act of kindness that morning. It had given her purpose, a reminder of human connection. Then Mr. Parrish spoke. His voice was clear and calm. "Maria, I want to ask you about a difficult situation you faced and how you handled it." Maria's mind raced. She thought of the car breaking down, of sitting in that cafe with empty pockets, but she decided to share honestly. She described the morning's events, her car, her last dollar, the man who had paid for her lunch. She watched his face as she spoke. He looked surprised, then moved when she mentioned his act of kindness. Finally, she said, "That moment reminded me how important it is to connect with people, to see them as individuals, not just numbers or clients. It taught me to stay humble and open-hearted." She paused, letting her words sink in. The room was silent for a moment, and she worried she had overstepped. Then James Parrish smiled, and the others exchanged looks. That was courageous of you to share, Mr. Parrish said. It tells me about your character and your values. Maria exhaled, relief washing over her. She felt the tension in her shoulders ease. The rest of the interview flowed more easily. The panel asked follow-up questions. Maria answered with what felt like genuine excitement. After what seemed like only minutes, Patricia Lane returned and quietly slipped a notepad onto the table. Thank you, Miss Sanchez, Denise said. We appreciate your time and thoughtful answers. We'll be in touch soon. The panel stood and shook her hand again. Maria thanked each of them and gathered her bag. As she approached the door, Mr. Parrish stood as well. He extended his hand. Once more, thank you, Maria. I enjoyed speaking with you. His eyes were kind, and Maria felt a genuine connection. Thank you, sir, she replied, smiling. Then she turned and left the room. Out in the hallway, Patricia smiled at her. You did very well, she said softly. Maria nodded, her heart still racing. She walked down the corridor and back into the lobby. The same bright light from the morning streamed through the windows. As she reached the revolving door, she spotted a sleek water cooler nearby and paused to take a sip. She closed her eyes. Savoring the cool water, felt a gentle pride bloom in her chest. She thought of James Parrish not just as the CEO, but as the stranger who had helped her with her last dollar. She wondered if he remembered her. She hoped she had shown him the gratitude and warmth he had shown her. Maria stepped outside into the morning sun, her steps lighter than they had been hours ago. The busy city street felt welcoming now. She walked away from the building feeling hopeful, alive with possibility, and ready to see where this new connection might lead. The week after the interview felt like a slow dance for Maria. Each morning, she woke early, dressed carefully, and checked her phone as soon as she sat at the small kitchen table. She poured herself a cup of tea and stared at the steam rising, wondering if today would be the day she heard back. She replayed every moment of that interview in her mind, the way Denise Wu had smiled when Maria described her community plans, the thoughtful nod from Colin Blake, and most of all, the calm, encouraging gaze of James Parrish. Her days passed in a blur of routine. She continued applying to other jobs, but her heart was set on this one. Each cover letter she sent reminded her of the company's mission and how much she wanted to be part of it. She reviewed her notes from the interview, refining her ideas for workshops and outreach events. She even sketched outlines for new volunteer programs, imagining how she would present them if given the chance. Maria visited the cafe where she and James had shared that first meal. She sat at the same table, wrapped in a light cardigan against the morning chill. The barista recognized her and offered a free refill of coffee. Maria smiled and thanked her. She ordered an egg sandwich with extra cheese, her treat for staying hopeful. She glanced around, half expecting to see James walk through the door. But he never appeared. One afternoon, as she carried laundry up the stairs of her tiny apartment building, her phone buzzed with a message. She paused on the landing, heart pounding, and unlocked it. It was an email from Patricia Lane. The subject line read, "Thank you for your time." Maria tapped it open, her fingers trembling. Inside was a short note. "Dear Maria, thank you for meeting with us last week. We were impressed by your passion and ideas. We will be in touch soon with our decision. Best regards, Patricia Lane." Maria exhaled slowly, impressed but not yet hired. She sat on the top landing and let the afternoon sun warm her face. She told herself to stay patient. She pictured James's kind smile from that morning in the cafe. She pictured his words, "I'll cover the rest." She held on to that moment as proof that good things could happen. Days turned into nearly a week before another message arrived. This time, it was a phone call late in the afternoon. Maria was folding a load of laundry when her phone rang. "Oh!" The screen showed a blocked number. She hesitated, then answered. "Hello," she said softly. "Is this Maria Sanchez?" asked a calm voice. "Yes, speaking." "Maria, this is James Parrish." Maria froze, her hands slipping on the shirt she was folding. "I wanted to thank you again for your time last week. I've been reviewing all candidates and I can't stop thinking. About our conversation? Maria's heart thundered. Oh, hello, Mr. Parrish. It's so nice to hear from you. Please, call me James, he said. I know it's informal, but I hope you don't mind. His voice held a warm note. I reached out because your story about our lunch stuck with me. I realized I hadn't properly thanked you for your kindness that morning. Maria blinked. You remembered? He chuckled softly. How could I forget? It's rare someone offers food to a stranger when they have no need to. It showed me who you are. He paused. I'd like to invite you back to our office. I want to talk about a community program I'm planning. I think your ideas would fit perfectly. Can you come in tomorrow at 11? Maria's hands shook as she clutched the phone. Yes, absolutely. I'd be honored. Great, James said. I'll send you the details by email. See you then. He hung up. Maria stood in the laundry room, overwhelmed. She ran her hands through her hair and let out a small laugh of disbelief. Her phone buzzed with an email from James Parrish, a formal invitation to meet in his office at 11 the next morning. The subject line was simple: let's talk. That night, Maria barely slept, lay in bed, thrilling at the thought of returning to the company, this time as a collaborator, not just an applicant. She reviewed her sketches and notes, considering which ideas to present. She wanted to be prepared. She told herself to breathe and rest. But excitement kept her mind racing. The next morning, she dressed carefully in the same outfit she had worn to the interview because it had made a good impression then, she thought. She left her apartment early and took the bus to the building. When she arrived at the lobby, it felt like stepping into a dream. She told the receptionist she had an appointment with Mr. Parrish, and Patricia Lane greeted her with a friendly nod. Patricia led Maria to a smaller conference room this time, one lined with bookshelves filled with colorful binders and awards. A round table sat in the center, and at it, James Parrish waited with a warm smile. He stood as she entered and shook her hand. I'm glad you could make it, Maria, he said. Please have a seat. She sat opposite him, resting her bag. On her lap, the morning sun filtered through the window, painting the room in soft light. James opened his briefcase and pulled out a stack of papers. I've been thinking about our lunch and your suggestions. I want to launch a pilot outreach program focused on neighborhood mentorship. I'd like you to lead it. Maria's breath caught. Lead it, she whispered. James nodded. Yes, I believe you have the vision and the heart for this. We'll provide funding, and you'll have a small team to support you. You'll report directly to me. He tapped the stack of papers. Here's the project outline. Take a look and tell me what you think. Maria picked up the first page and scanned the heading. Community Mentorship Pilot Queue for Launch. She read through the goals, connecting seniors and young adults, offering skill-sharing sessions, providing support for single parents. Each item matched ideas she had shared during her interview, only now it felt bigger, real, with resources behind it. She looked up at James. This is incredible, she said, her voice trembling. Thank you for trusting me, he smiled gently. Your kindness that morning showed me exactly what I needed in leadership. Someone who cares more about people than profit. That quality matters here. Maria felt tears prick at her eyes. She closed the binder and nodded. I won't let you down. James leaned back. I know you won't. Let's talk details. They spent the next hour reviewing timelines, budget, allocations, staffing needs, and outreach strategies. James asked thoughtful questions, and Maria offered ideas confidently. She suggested partnering with local schools, reaching out through community centers, and using social media to share stories. James listened intently, jotting notes on a notepad. Every so often, James would look up and smile, and Maria felt a warmth spread through her chest. It was more than professional respect, it felt personal, like two people who had formed a bond over a simple act of kindness. As they wrapped up, James stood and extended his hand. I look forward to working with you, Maria. Maria shook his hand firmly, her heart full. Thank you for this opportunity. She left the office with a folder of project plans in her hand. The sunlight outside seemed brighter than ever. She walked down the street humming a tune of hope. She stopped by the cafe one more time before heading home. She ordered the same egg sandwich, but this time paid for it herself. She sat at the table, closed her eyes, and savored the first bite. Maria remembered that morning when she had no choice but to lean on a stranger's generosity. She thought of James's kind eyes and the trust he now placed in her. She realized how a small gesture had changed her path. She smiled to herself and whispered, "Thank you." Then she pulled out her notebook and began jotting ideas for her new role, ready to turn that kindness into action for others. Maria stood early again, her heart light with anticipation. Today was the first day of her community mentorship program. She dressed in a simple blouse and comfortable slacks, adding a bright scarf for a touch of warmth. As she left her apartment, she felt a flutter of nerves and excitement. For weeks, she had planned every detail. Now it was time to see her ideas come to life. She arrived at the community center just before 9. The brick building looked welcoming in the morning sun. Inside, volunteers bustled about, setting up tables and arranging chairs. Colorful posters lined the walls, announcing mentorship launch day and listing the day's schedule. Maria walked through the room, greeting each volunteer by name. There was Tanya, a college student who would mentor a local schoolgirl, and Mr. Patel, a retired teacher ready to share his love of history. She felt proud of the team she had gathered. At 9 o'clock sharp, families began to arrive. A grandmother held her grandson's hand. Both looked shy but curious. A single mother approached with her teenage daughter, the girl's eyes wide at the bright room. Maria stood at the front and tapped a small bell. The room quieted and all eyes turned to her. She smiled and waved, then spoke softly. "Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this special day." Her voice felt strong and clear. She introduced the concept, pairing local youth with experienced mentors. She explained how they would meet weekly to share skills and stories. She reminded everyone that this program started because of a simple act of kindness, how a CEO named James Parrish had recognized her passion and offered support. She glanced at the audience, some nodded. Others listened with rapt attention. She felt warmth spread through her chest. After her introduction, she broke the group into pairs. Each mentor and mentee found their matching partner. Maria watched. As the grandmother showed her grandson how to thread beads for jewelry, she smiled at the sight. Nearby, Mr. Patel and his young pupil sat at a table covered in old maps and notebooks. The boy's eyes sparkled as the teacher spoke about ancient travels. Maria realized these scenes were the heart of her vision. By midday, the room buzzed with laughter and conversation. Maria circulated among the pairs, offering encouragement and answering questions. Tanya's mentee asked for help with a school assignment, and Tanya patiently guided her through each step. A young man named Carlos showed his mentor, who once owned a bakery, how to knead dough for fresh bread. The mentor beamed with pride. Maria felt tears prick at her eyes. This was exactly why she had pushed so hard. Later, the group gathered for a shared lunch. Volunteers had prepared simple sandwiches and fruit, enough for everyone. Maria took a seat at the long table, feeling both exhausted and exhilarated. She struck up a conversation with a single mother named Elena. They spoke quietly about balancing work and family. Elena thanked Maria for creating the program, saying, "My daughter needed someone to listen and guide her." Today, she smiled more than she has in months. Maria nodded, touched by the gratitude. After lunch, James Parrish stepped into the community center. Maria looked up in surprise. He walked through the doorway with a warm smile, or a casual shirt and jeans, blending into the friendly atmosphere. Volunteers paused their work to greet him. Maria rose and shook his hand, her heart swelling. "I thought I'd drop by and see your first day," he said. His voice held genuine warmth. He walked beside her as she showed him around. She introduced him to each mentor and mentee pair. He knelt to talk with children, asking them what they were learning. He listened closely, nodding and asking follow-up questions. Maria watched as he gently guided a teenage boy through a programming exercise, offering tips and encouragement. She realized he was as invested as she was. After the tour, they returned to the front of the room. Chairs had been arranged for a brief feedback session. Maria invited participants to share their thoughts. One by one, volunteers and families spoke. A father said, "My daughter learned something new and feels more confident already." Mr. Patel added, "I've met wonderful young people who remind me why teaching matters." Each comment brought smiles and applause. When the last person finished, James stood and addressed the group. "I am proud to see this program thriving," he said. His gaze found Maria's, and he continued, "Maria's leadership and your commitment have created something truly special. Let's keep this spirit of kindness alive." The room echoed with applause. Maria's cheeks warmed as she stood too. Return his praise as the day wound down. Maria and James gathered the volunteers for a quick debrief. They spoke about what went well and what could improve. Maria listened carefully, taking notes. She valued each suggestion. James offered support. For additional resources, more funding for supplies, help with marketing to recruit future participants. Maria felt buoyed by his promise to back her efforts. After cleaning up tables and stacking chairs, Maria walked outside with James. The afternoon sun had softened, casting long shadows. They stood on the sidewalk, watching volunteers head home. James turned to her. "Today was remarkable," he said quietly. "You made this happen." Maria shook her head. "It's the community that made it happen. I just gave it a chance." He smiled and placed a hand on her shoulder. "No, you had the vision and the courage. You showed what kindness can do." Maria felt a warmth spread through her chest. She thought back to that day she had no money for lunch and how James's gift of a few dollars had sparked this journey. She realized how a simple gesture had grown into something that touched dozens of lives. As they parted ways, James said, "I look forward to the next event." Maria nodded, already imagining new workshops and partnerships. She felt a deep sense of purpose and belonging. That evening, Maria returned to her apartment, tired but happy. She sat at her desk and opened her notebook. She wrote down reflections on the day stories she had heard, lessons learned, ideas for expansion. She scribbled notes for a grant proposal and outlines for a volunteer training session. She paused, closing her eyes and breathing deeply. The room was quiet, but her mind buzzed with excitement. She whispered to herself, "Thank you," remembering the kindness that started it all. Then she added a new line to her notes, "Pay it forward." With that promise, she climbed into bed, her heart full. She drifted to sleep, dreaming of all the good still to come. The months that followed brought steady growth to the mentorship program. Each week, Maria arrived at the community center feeling a mix of excitement and pride. She watched as mentors and mentees formed strong bonds. Some pairs met at coffee shops, others at the local library. Every meeting brought new stories of small victories, like a shy teenager finding the courage to speak up in class, or a retired artist rediscovering passion for painting while teaching a young child. One crisp morning in late autumn, Maria stepped into her apartment building lobby and noticed a colorful flyer on the bulletin board. It announced an awards ceremony for local nonprofits. The title caught her eye: Community Impact Awards. Her program had been nominated for Most Innovative Outreach Project. She felt a thrill of excitement. She had never expected such recognition. That evening, she called James Parrish to share the news. His warm laugh came through the phone. "Maria, that's wonderful," he said. "You deserve it. Let me know if you need anything for the ceremony." His support made her smile. She felt confident knowing he believed in her work. On the night of the awards, she dressed in a simple but elegant dress and arrived at the town hall. Volunteers had transformed the space with twinkling lights and banners. Tables were set with refreshments, and local leaders mingled in the crowd. Maria checked in at the registration desk and scanned the room, searching for familiar faces. Soon, she spotted Denise Wu from the company board, wearing a bright smile. Denise waved her over. "We're so proud of you," Denise said, giving her a warm hug. James couldn't make it tonight, but he sent his congratulations.
Hi, Maria.
Felt her eyes grow misty with gratitude. She thanked Denise and joined the other nominees on a bench near the stage. When the presenter announced the winner for a most innovative outreach project, Maria's heart pounded. Names of finalists appeared on the screen behind the podium. When her program's name was called, she let out a small gasp. Applause filled the hall as she walked to the stage. She shook the presenter's hand and held the glass trophy in her hands, its smooth surface catching the light. In her brief speech, she said, "Thank you to everyone who believed in this idea. This program started with a simple act of kindness and grew because of your dedication. I am grateful for this honor and will continue working to help our community." The audience cheered and Maria stepped down, clutching the trophy to her chest. Backstage, Denise hugged her again. "You did it," she said. Maria smiled through tears. She felt a sense of deep fulfillment. After the ceremony, as she drove home, she reflected on her journey. She thought of the morning her car broke down, of the dollar tucked in her wallet, and of the stranger who had shared his money with her. Without that generosity, she might never have met James Parrish, and none of this would have happened. She whispered "thank you" as she parked in front of her building. The next day, she arrived at the community center and found volunteers already setting up tables. They crowded around her, congratulating her on the award. She held the trophy aloft, and they cheered. Tanya, the college student mentor, gave her a card signed by every volunteer. Inside, they had written messages of thanks and hope. Maria felt her eyes water again as she read their words. Later, she sat at her desk and opened her laptop. She drafted an email to James Parrish, describing the ceremony and sharing photos. She thanked him for his belief in her. Before sending, she paused and smiled, then added, "Because of your kindness, many lives have changed, including mine." She clicked send. That afternoon, she heard a knock at the office door. She looked up to see James standing in the doorway, holding 2 coffee cups. He smiled. "I thought I'd surprise you," he said, handing her a cup. "Congratulations on the award." Maria stood and hugged him. "Thank you for coming," she said, gratitude shining in her eyes. They sat together at a small table. By the window, the sunlight made the coffee steam glow. James asked about her plans for next year. Maria described her vision to expand the program to 2 more neighborhoods, to train more volunteers, and to build a digital platform for mentors and mentees to share resources. James listened thoughtfully, then offered additional funding and a small team from the company's community relations department to help with tech support. Maria felt a spark of joy. With this new backing, her program could reach even more people. She sketched out a timeline on a notepad and James nodded in approval. At one point he said, "You see how one small moment of kindness can ripple outward? I saw it that morning, and it led me here." Maria smiled and said, "And I see how. Belief can change a life." As they finished their coffee, James glanced at his watch. "I should get back to the office," he said. "But I wanted to make sure you know how proud I am." He rose and offered his hand. Maria shook it and watched him leave, feeling inspired. That evening, Maria walked home under a sky full of stars. She paused on the sidewalk and looked up, thinking of all who shaped her journey. She thought of her own parents, who had taught her to help others, of Denise, who first believed in her ideas, and of James, whose one act of generosity had set everything in motion. She realized she was part of a circle of giving and receiving. A few days later, a letter arrived in her mailbox. It was from a local school district, inviting her to present at an education conference. They wanted to learn how to start similar mentorship programs across the region. Maria felt thrilled. She accepted immediately, imagining how this work could spread beyond her city. Over the next weeks, she prepared a workshop presentation. She gathered stories, data, and photos to illustrate the program's impact. She practiced speaking in front of friends and family, refining her message so it would inspire others to act. On the day of the conference, she stood before a packed auditorium of educators and civic leaders. She shared her journey from that $1 to the award-winning program. She spoke about the power of kindness, about the mentors who volunteered their time, and the young people and seniors who found friendship and purpose. She urged the audience to look for opportunities to help, to invest in their communities, and to listen when someone needs support. As she concluded, the room erupted in applause. She stepped off the stage with a sense of accomplishment and hope. People approached her afterward, asking questions and offering partnerships. One teacher said, "We want to start this next semester." Another civic leader said, "We'll fund your expansion." Maria smiled broadly, feeling the momentum build. That night, she returned home and opened her notebook. She wrote a final line for the page. "Kindness changes everything." She closed the book and looked around her small apartment. It was simple, but for her, it was filled with meaning. She stood by the window and gazed at the city lights. She remembered the day she had only $1, the stranger who had helped her, the interview, and the path that followed. Humbled and grateful, she whispered to the night, "I will keep paying it forward." Then she turned off the light and went to sleep, her heart full of dreams for all the good yet to come.